Welcome to England, land of chavs, football hooligans, and an obsessive need to measure things using arbitrary parts of the human body. Take the measurement of the yard, for instance. In the 20th century, it was officially declared to be the distance from the tip of the king's nose to the end of his outstretched thumb. Yes, dear viewer, you were once measuring your kitchen countertops based on Henry I's sneeze radius. But what is a king if not the ultimate influencer? These fellows didn't just rule the land, they were the land. Their faces were on coins, their whims dictated justice, and their moods apparently controlled the bloody weather. If a king stubbed his toe, you could probably expect a plague to roll in by lunchtime. The origins of kingship? Utter mystery. But we know early rulers liked to claim they were descended from gods, specifically Woden. As we've mentioned previously, the Saxons insisted their kings had divine ancestry, which is the medieval equivalent of saying you're 3% Viking because of a dodgy DNA test off eBay. Even Edward the Confessor, all holy and saintly, traced his lineage to Woden. Bit awkward for the church, really. Being a king wasn't just about looking important while wearing a massive hat. It meant being the ultimate landlord. Kings owned everything. Land, bridges, rivers, markets, and your sense of existential dread. They were warlords in fancy cloaks, but oh, did they know how to brand themselves. William the Conqueror, for example, didn't create the idea of an all-powerful king. He just walked in, sat down and said, "Yes, this will do nicely." And if you think medieval kings weren't influencers, consider this. Richard I was the first king to use the word "we" in official documents, basically inventing the royal we. John I, bless his tiny wicked heart, was the first to call himself king of the land, rather than king of the people. A wonderfully unsubtle way of saying this isn't about you, peasants. Then we have the truly bonkers bits of royal history. Ever heard of the king's touch? A belief that English kings could literally cure diseases like scrofula just by touching people? Yes, because when you're covered in filth and riddled with medieval bacteria, what you really need is a sweaty monarch's fingers poking at your swollen glands. They kept this tradition going until Queen Anne in 1712, who once touched little Samuel Johnson in the hope of curing him. It didn't work, but at least he got some decent essays out of it. And now, dear viewer, let's talk about the thing that medieval England excelled at, getting absolutely wrecked by the Vikings. By the end of the 10th century, England was rich, like rob me blind rich. So the Danes came knocking with their usual diplomacy, burning, looting and turning monasteries into Viking Airbnb properties. King Ethelred II, whose nickname, Unready, actually means badly advised. Yes, he had the medieval equivalent of a lawyer who defends serial arsonists by handing them matches, came up with the genius idea of paying the Vikings to go away. This was called Danegeld, otherwise known as protection money, or a great way to tell your enemies you have more money than sense. Predictably, this backfired. The Vikings now knew England was both wealthy and spineless. It was like shaking a picnic basket in front of a grizzly bear and expecting it to go vegan. It's like showing burglars around your house, showing them your thousands in valuables, telling them all the houses in the area are filled with the same and more, then paying them £100 in the hope that they go away. It's probably not going to work, is it? So then came Swine Forkbeard. Great name, not so great news for England. By 1013 he had England in his pocket, forcing poor Ethelred to run off to Normandy. Now enter Canute the Great, who took over and, fun fact, once tried to command the sea to stop moving. Now, this wasn't the act of a madman, it was actually a pointed lesson in not believing your own hype. Shame more rulers didn't take notes. Skipping forward, England went from Viking rule to Norman rule. And by the time Edward the Confessor died in 1066, we had a right mess. Harold Godwinson, an English noble, grabbed the throne. Meanwhile, William of Normandy was having an existential crisis in France, muttering, "Excuse me, Harold did bloody what? Where's my crown?" William had no real claim. But why let facts get in the way of a good invasion? He built over 500 ships and convinced the Pope to back him. Yes, he got a papal endorsement like some medieval influencer and set off for England, only to be immediately yeeted off course by the weather. Harold, meanwhile, had to deal with a full-scale Viking invasion first, racing up to Stamford Bridge, smashing the Norwegians and thinking, well, that's that sorted. Then destiny stops by, slaps him in the face and delivers the worst letter he could want. Subject, William is here. Something about conquering. The Battle of Hastings, the 14th of October 1066. Harold, the last true English king, had his army positioned well. They held, and then, whack! An arrow allegedly hits him in the eye. Whether that's true or just Norman propaganda, we'll never know. But his men scattered, William took the crown, and just to prove a point, he then burned half of England, because at this stage, why not? And that, dear friends, is why England today speaks a strange cocktail of Saxon and Norman French. Every beef you eat is Norman, while every cow in the field is Saxon. You're welcome. So, what have we learned? That monarchy is very good at reinventing itself. Vikings don't take no for an answer. And that if you ever wondered why history is ridiculous at times, consider that England once measured things based on royal anatomy. Thank God Henry VIII wasn't in charge of that decision. Like and follow for more history filled with sarcasm and dread.